The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Aubrey McLaughlin, and I'm the Director of Alumni Professional Networks for University of Maryland's Alumni Association. We're excited you're able to join us for the final week of our financial planning series, Springing into Action, a series on financial wellness, presented by Rey Calvello, graduate from the class of 2008, and Tim Carroll, graduate from the class of 1987. This webinar is part of the Alumni Association's Professional Development Webinar Series, in which we hope to provide thought-provoking and valuable content that will help alumni like you achieve your personal and professional goals. We have a lot of information to cover today, but we will be taking questions at the end. Please feel free to submit any questions you have at any time using the question box located in the GoToWebinar control panel. Rey has been with Independence Planning Group since 2010 and has been in financial services altogether for about 10 years. Rey has built a niche with physicians, CRNAs, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants. He enjoys establishing a process and sense of financial stability for their short-term retirement and legacy objectives. Rey also enjoys presenting to business owners and their employees through financial wellness workshops. Tim has also been with Independence Planning Group for 10 years. He is a registered representative with Park Avenue Securities and an agent of the Guardian Insurance Company. Tim works with individuals and families. In addition, he focuses on small to medium-sized businesses in the area of business maximization and succession planning. Tim utilizes his 25-plus years of experience in running businesses and taking them to the next level. And now we will get started. Rey and Tim, take it away.
Thanks, Aubrey, and good afternoon again, everyone. This is Tim, and Rey and I are glad to be back with you again, and we do appreciate those of you who are on the call here for the fourth week. We appreciate you sticking with us for these 4 weeks and hope you're finding some value out of what we've been able to bring through these educational sessions sponsored by Wealth Steps. And the Wealth Steps, it's a unique benefit that the University of Maryland Alumni Association is bringing to you. In large part, we do this with employers. But we also do them with employees. And again, we're looking at this as an alumni association offering here. So again, if you find some value, we'll get into today's program in a moment, but we want to remind you that you do have access to Wealth Steps site. And as Aubrey mentioned, we'll open it up to some questions here at the end to recap, not just today, but possibly even the entire program that we've had over the last 4 weeks. So we're excited about the progress that some of you already made. And realizing with your financial decisions that you make around money. So today, in a moment, before Rey gives us a little value on what the benefits are of Wealth Steps, we're going to start talking about step 4. And as today goes on, we'll expose you to another uncommon viewpoint around your money. We'll get to that in a moment. But first, Rey's going to tell us a little bit about the value of Wealth Steps and what it brings to you.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everybody, for being on today. Thank you, Aubrey. And going into the value of Wealth Steps, making sure everyone that's on right this second, or we have a lot of people registered, about 128, 130, and we've averaged about 30 people live during our lunch sessions here. So if you're listening to this as a recording, just make sure that you do still have access to the Wealth Steps summary website for yourself, whether it's next week, tomorrow, or a year from now. Just make sure that if you're listening to this through a recording that you still have access to utilize this. So that's first. And the value, the summary that we see here is that everyone gets this. And it's just a really easy color-coded blueprint from each of the 4 steps we go through. Today's step 4 at the bottom. But the first week, step 1, protecting your todays. Step 2, world-class savings. Step 3, life event funds. And today, living debt-free. So make sure that you utilize that Wealth Steps registration, and that will be on the email sent afterwards for you to log on and go through that for yourself. And if you have questions after you're done, you can ask us, reach out to us, or use your own advisor if you have so. It's a little bit about us. Aubrey already explained. And a little bit about Independence Planning Group. We've been around since 1987. And really our mission is to help families, business owners, across the country to make sure that they are doing things in a process-driven way. We have a lot of advisors and brokers around the country. One question may be, well, you guys are in Pennsylvania. If you want to see someone in person, we do have associates across the country near you that we can, that are Wealth Steps associates as well. So if that's an issue, we can definitely introduce you to someone like that. And Tim will start today. on step 4.
In addition to what Ray said too, both Ray and I do have clients all around the country. So
Sure.
Depending on where you're located, we are able to work with you. And I have already worked with a few people from these calls who are not in our general geographic area.
Correct.
So just in case you're aware of that. So let's get into today, talking about step 4. Ray mentioned, the first 3 steps already, but today's step 4 is all about the prospects of living a financial life without the drag of debt. So we're going to take a deep dive today into debt management to make sure you're making the very best decisions around how you handle debt so that your financial future can be as best as it possibly can be. And debt isn't necessarily a word that any of us want to attach ourselves to or have our balance sheets tied to. However, it does happen. It can happen in an instant before we even know it happened. And as we move through life, we are surrounded by the idea of having more, buying more, and ultimately spending more. Sometimes debt creeps into our lives, not just from wanting to have more, but from needing the basics in life, and there aren't any sufficient resources to pay for it. So what we're going to talk about a little bit now is money. Would you gamble less if you? And this is a kind of something. The example we're going to use here is a little bit of kind of common. It's in the news today as far as gambling, and now you have sports betting, all this stuff becoming legal. But if you think about this, actual money as the actual physical cash in your pocket, it does feel different than things that simply symbolize money. And the example we're going to use right now is if you think about gambling. You go to a casino. Imagine if you went to a casino, and would you gamble less if you actually had cash that you were using instead of poker chips? And the poker chips symbolize the real money you're gambling with. Casinos know that we feel different when we use cash. It feels more real to us. So they use chips for card games, and when you add cash to a slot machine, it's converted into credits and vouchers rather than dollars and coins. The same thing is true when you use credit cards. Using cash feels much different than using a plastic card. So we often buy a little more, maybe we splurge a little more, we feel better about buying now and paying later. But how would your spending change if every transaction was made by using cash?
So as we look into step 4, we want to recognize that debt is an overwhelming problem, but there are solutions to managing that debt. Okay, so we've talked about how vital it is to become a world-class saver by establishing a healthy savings habit, saving 15 to 20% annually. Building a more successful financial future begins with the improved savings, point blank. So as you're saving 10, 15, 20% of what you make each year at X company, putting that on your balance sheet and watching that grow on your behalf over time. You'll have an ample level of liquid funds so that if life says, wait a second, we have a surprise for you, that you can respond to it without caving in on you. However, there are often many forces that get in the way of saving regularly. We all come across that. So the main contributor and roadblock is having debt. Making debt payments creates a barrier to building wealth. And there are roadblocks that stand in your way from becoming this world-class saver that slow you down and can rob a better financial life from you. So roadblocks such as having a house payment that's too big. That takes up too much space in their overall financial picture. Every few years, rolling out of an old car that still works fine in lieu of a new car. Mismanaging short-term debt like student loans and credit card bills and car loan payments themselves. So these all have a significant impact on your ability to save and protect your future. So those big roadblocks, those 5, are the kinds of things that really can cost households millions of dollars over their working years. So we teach people a very important rule in wealth steps. That says your house payments should only be so big and that your short-term debt payments should be eliminated permanently, allowing you to focus on saving properly. So let's start with a definition. And Tim will go over that.
And the definition in wealth steps about debt in general is that you couldn't afford something, a car, a new phone, a big house, whatever that new gadget might be. But since you couldn't afford to buy it today, you bought it anyway by using a car loan, credit card, or mortgage. And when you did this, you committed your paycheck, even though you haven't even earned it yet, and it's going to be used to pay things out over time. So again, that's the definition we go by, just to kind of bring it into terms with regards to debt. There are different types of debt, obviously, as many of you know, and to fully understand how to best handle your current debt, we're going to look at these different types and how to best manage each. So first, We're going to take a look at short-term debt. That would be credit cards, car loans, student debt, home equity lines or HELOCs, and they're all sitting under what we consider short-term debt. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, another problem is the crowding out effect that a home buying decision can have on your wealth building. And this is the mortgage. And we've had these questions come up in the first couple of weeks of our discussion with you here regarding wealth steps is, which is the better mortgage? Should it be a 15? Should it be a 30? And what we will tell you is every situation is different. However, what we're going to talk to you about today is kind of bringing a different perspective on how mortgages can affect you over the long haul. And also short-term debt, and specifically with regards to credit card balances. Month after month, the interest rates that are attached to those balances can be devastating obstacles towards wealth building. They could damage your ability to respond to a sudden life event you may come into. And we'll get into that a little more in detail in a few minutes here. But when that realtor, let's go back to mortgages a little bit, how that all these kind of come together. When a realtor takes you around to a nice neighborhood, they show you the new homes, they attract your attention, and again, this is no bashing on the realtors, but this is kind of what we see when we talk to clients. They see, you can see yourself living in that neighborhood. The larger home, cost of ownership become larger, your homeowner's insurance can be higher, your property taxes can be higher, repair bills can be higher, your cars are probably nicer because you're in a situation where you want to keep up with the Joneses next door. And then, in fact, you may now have a private school or social expenditures, all the other things that go with being in that nicer neighborhood. And these expenses on top of your mortgage payment, they can minimize your ability to have a fair liquidity balance and affects how much you're able to save. Without having a high level of savings, money that you can access immediately in case of an emergency or a life-changing event, you're now leaving you and your family exposed to some kind of financial devastation.
So we're going to look at 3 case studies that will show you in greater detail how credit card and student loans, auto loans, and mortgages have a severe impact on your debt and life. So in this case study, we're looking at someone with 2 loans, a credit card they're paying about $450 per month on, and a student loan with a payment of about $650 per month. The total of these monthly payments is $1,100 per month, or $13,200 per year. Often, this amount of cash flow feels like a bucket that is filled to the top and is about to overflow. This high payment may be crowding out the ability to protect your todays, block the ability to become a world-class saver, and build up liquid funds for a variety of life events. So imagine you were to take that overflowing bucket of debt and pour it into a larger container, like a bathtub, to make it more manageable and prevent it from spilling over. Perhaps by making minimum payments on the credit cards, refinancing the debt into lower interest rates, or taking your time with the student loans by stretching them out, you can cut the payments by 50%. Over the course of the next 10 years, you could take the cash flow savings and use it to increase the amount of money you save and invest for your future, or shore up your protection. If you save this difference each month, you produce $92,213 of liquid savings or investments in just 10 years. So sometimes pausing saving for retirement or using unproductive money to pay off high interest debt can keep you from going backwards. Getting serious about the futility with trying to move forward with wealth building at maybe 8% pace, while at the same time having the same amount of money or cash flow going the opposite direction at perhaps an 18% rate. So think of it this way. You have $30,000 in your 401k plan, trying to grow at 8%, but you also have $30,000 of credit card debt moving backwards at 18%. There's no way that equates to financial progress. And when you see it side by side, hopefully you can see it how I can, or how we can, the futility of building that wealth at a higher rate, while minimizing and even eliminating that, say, 18% of debt that is holding you back. If a credit card company is charging 18% non-deductible, you're moving backwards against the same amount of money or cash flow that is trying to move forward at an 8% taxable rate. So everything you surround yourself with in your home and your life goes down in value over time, right? We need to think about this. Cars, appliances, clothing, furniture, everything that you buy must someday be replaced due to wear and tear. You also must factor in new inventions. This last decade or so, we've seen plenty of new inventions that we suddenly find out about that we can't now live without. Cars that park themselves, curved TV screens, the latest smartphone version. There are products and services that continue to evolve, and the marketing pressure that is thrust upon us is intense. Technology is continuously improving at a rapid pace, and we find ourselves wanting the latest and greatest, trying to keep up with these new items. And when we buy those new things that didn't exist last year, those same dollars or dollars that could have been growing on your balance sheet. So when those things wear out, such as carpets, shingles, car tires, appliances, furniture, clothing, when they've been designed for a lifetime, then you must take even more money off your balance sheet to replace them with the new and improved. So when you buy those new things that didn't exist last year, those same dollars are dollars that could have been growing on your balance sheet. When those things wear out, you must take even more money off your balance sheet to replace them with the new and improved. There's also the idea of wanting to have a better life tomorrow than you do today. Finer wine, longer vacations, more rewards for the hard work and good financial decisions you're making. So as you add up all the payments of 2 cars in the driveway that get replaced every 4 to 6 years, the cars get more expensive, the payments get higher, and the interest charges are almost irrelevant. These automobiles that are going down in value are depreciating in value, steal almost $1 million in wealth that won't be there when retirement starts. We went over a little bit about that last week. It's the payments made plus the lost opportunity that can be enjoyed on those payments. That's money leaving your balance sheet, money you could have been saving, putting towards protection or appropriate investment choices. So here's an example of buying a new car and rolling out of that car every 5 years into a brand new car and repeating that every 5 years for 30 years while you're working, causing over $900,000 of lost wealth. It's the cost of the payments themselves plus what those payments could have done had they stayed on your balance sheet. And those dollars end up at a finance company or your local car dealership and not with you. So in this example, one could lower their annual payments to $6,000 compared to the $9,600 in the new car's option. And it seems insignificant, it seems small, but as 5-year cycles roll on for the next 30 to 40 years, money now stays on the balance sheet. It could be liquid, could be available for life event responses, allow people to save more for their future, invest more wisely, and be more protected throughout. Again, if you're buying used cars, it makes more financial sense to purchase a car with 30 to 40,000 miles on it and use new car spray instead of falling prey to the substantial loss of wealth of buying new cars every few years. And the math shows there in that slide there.
Let's take a look at the next case study here, and this deals with the mortgage myths. 15 years is better than 30 years. Now, we had a couple questions come up on this a few weeks ago, and we've had some subsequent follow-up discussions on this as well. And there is a common misconception out there in the world that a 15-year mortgage is a better choice than a 30-year mortgage. Now, that's not to say there isn't a place for a 15-year mortgage. That's not what we're saying here. But let's take a look at this, this comparison here. If you're looking at 15 years, you can see the empty bucket on the screen here. What that means is that for 15 years, if you accumulated basically no wealth, saved zero, but you might think to yourself, all right, well, on the positive side, and this is where all the thought process comes in, well, now my mortgage is paid off. And that is true. However, keep in mind, for that 15-year period, there's going to be this possibility of being exposed to not having saved enough, or maybe paying more in taxes, or not having enough liquidity, or not having the right level of protection along the way. So additionally, those annual payments of 26 in this scenario here, this case in front of you, 26,628, that's tied up all your money into a house payment, allowing no room for savings, no room to build liquidity, no room to make any smart investment choices, and no room to protect yourself and your family. So that leads us to another topic we've talked about, the time value of money. And this is one area where it kind of ties into the mortgages a little bit, 15 versus 30. When you lose $1, the cost of having lost that $1 is not just the $1. It's $1 plus the use of that money forever, or at least for the rest of that person's life. And again, it's called the time value of money. See it right there, or lost opportunity cost. And that rate is determined by the best available rate for that individual home or business. That money could have been invested and had that loss not occur, and you put that money somewhere else. So again, taking now the next comparison here, using the 30-year mortgage, and that bucket that was previously empty, let's say it's now half full. And by choosing the 30-year mortgage, in this example, your annual payments are almost $10,000 less than the 15-year option. And with that additional cash flow now freed up and not locked up into your home payment, you're able to use that money to save, let's just say at a 5% rate, over $250,000. So looking at our case study here, think about which option you'd rather have after a 15-year period. You could have $234,000 in savings and a $171,000 mortgage balance, or zero savings and the zero mortgage balance. It's not just the money that you lost by not saving annually. You also should have considered the lost opportunity of those dollars that will never again be present. So by building your savings, you're also protecting yourself from the what ifs by having the ample emergency funds that we talked about last week. And think about those points when it comes to home buying decisions. Is my house payment taking up too much space? Is it too big? Or secondly, have I chosen a mortgage approach or strategy that compresses the payoff time frame, which drives up the cost each month of that mortgage, which crowds out my responsibility to respond to other financial issues that can come up?
So as we've mentioned in the past, our WellSteps philosophy is different from what you've been told or heard in the past. Traditionally, you've probably heard the common perspective on where your money should and in what order. It probably looks something like this. You have your earnings at the very top here, and there are things in your life that you must address. So you turn that valve a bit and let some of that money flow out. And the first thing that most people pour their hard-earned money into is their lifestyle. Cars, the newest gadgets, expensive dinners, the mall, keeping up with the Joneses, all the material things in life, a new smartphone, because we always need the latest and greatest, end up coming first. Next comes your home. People are pouring up to 35% of what they make into a mortgage payment. Now, you've already spent a good percentage of your earnings on lifestyle, so now factor in a house payment on top of that. Think about what you could possibly be left with for everything else in your life. And that then comes debt. All the time people focus on accelerating the debt payments, pouring more and more of their earnings into paying off their credit cards or loan payments. The problem with that is you're never able to get ahead of that debt because you're in turn not saving, which often forces people to turn to using credit. After all of that, then people save the small bit of what they have left over. And that common thought of there's always a next paycheck to put towards savings or next time. But what people often don't think about is, what if there is no next time or next paycheck? And then finally, in last place, then comes protection. By following that common traditional way of thinking, people scrape together what they can put towards their protection plan. Protection for themselves and their families, if there's any protection in place at all after pouring money into all the other things listed above. How much could even remain for an adequate amount of protection? So now we're going to go into a poll that Aubrey will bring up, and then I'll read the question after she brings it up.
Perfect. So I just launched the poll. It is on your screen right now. If you can take just a few seconds to select one of the options here. Once we get the majority of people on the webinar to vote, we will share the results with all of you.
Excellent. And this one should be a little bit longer in time, but the poll question is, the following choices is the common way we see cash flow from earnings prioritized per our WellSteps program. Which do we like to see up top in order? So take the time to figure out from the last couple of weeks the proper order.
See if those of you who've been paying attention over the last 4 weeks, just see what our approach is versus the common approach that we just that you see there in front of you.
And we'll leave this up for about another 10 seconds or so. We have about 78% of people on the webinar who have already put your vote in, so thank you for that.
Excellent.
We'll go ahead here, we'll close this, and then here are our results.
Excellent. So first, the majority people said savings at 50%, and then second was with 33% protection, and then third was 11% debt. So the correct answer through WellSteps would be to do protection first. and then go ahead.
Right, and those are the first two. I mean, you got them the top two in the order. And what we like to do, and what our philosophy is, we turn our attention in our wealth steps hierarchy. This is what we like to do. Our focus is more on the protection, the savings first. So you got the first two in the right order, but again, what we like to do with our hierarchy as far as cash flow goes, this is where our philosophy is drastically different from all the other noise you might hear out there from the TV personalities, so-called financial gurus, social media. Our perspective considers your best interest and your family's best interest first, not last. So we say that before anything else, before a new smartphone, new car, massive student loan payment, or pour some of your cash flow into gaining the appropriate amount of protection, life insurance, disability, umbrella insurance. Make sure that your todays are protected before you focus on your tomorrows. And that ensures if you could never work again, or worse, you and your family would be financially okay. And then next we would get in, after you have that level protection, that protection layer that we talked about, that's the proper layer in place. Now you take a look at taking a portion of your earnings, and again, we recommend, we've talked about this, 15 to 20% annually, putting that into some kind of savings vehicle. By doing this, by focusing on your savings towards the top versus the bottom, you're developing a healthy savings habit. And automatically saving 15 to 20% allows you to put that money away untouched, and you're able to learn to live off the rest. Now, when we meet with clients, the goal is always the 15 to 20. You may be saying out there, well, how am I going to get the 15 to 20 if I'm maybe not saving any now? This isn't like an automatic, it doesn't happen overnight sometimes. A lot of this is part of the process when we go through wealth steps.
And that 15 to 20% might be with different types of vehicles that accumulate to that 15 to 20%. So it's just not one vehicle. It may be many across the board.
Right. And as you begin to save and invest for your future, the emphasis then should be placed on building up money that can be accessed for a variety of life events. So it's not locked up for a single use, such as retirement. We recommend you save and invest in liquid accounts until you reach a point where you've reached a year's worth of income. And this may sound like a long way off and impossible to get to, but if you think about it, if you're able to put that 20% of your income each year, you'll reach the milestone in only about 5 years. So it is possible. We have clients that do reach that goal. Now, once you've protected your todays, established the strong saving habits, and you built up liquid funds, now you can be used. Now that liquid fund can be used for various life events. And the next step is now to eliminate the debt, which can drag down your wealth building potential in a significant way. So by following this cash flow hierarchy, you're putting yourself on a path to eliminate debt permanently versus putting yourself in a position where debt can return due to an unforeseen event. And now if you followed all the cash flow hierarchies process steps that we've just outlined, the remaining cash flow that's left for your lifestyle today is left for your lifestyle today. So in addition, you have a much stronger likelihood of being able to sustain that lifestyle through your entire life. Even if you've experienced twists and turns and unexpected events that life throws your way, with wealth steps, we want you to live the best life you can sustain rather than having a financial house of cards that can collapse at any moment.
So hopefully that was pretty good stuff. So debt is destructive, right? It is one of the most crippling financial forces that a person can face. And there's a lot of people that do face a lot of debt. Debt can destroy hopes and dreams, and it doesn't just hurt your financial future, but it also has rippling effects throughout your entire life. The level of stress that people are subjected to on a daily basis due to debt management is shocking. So it's an overwhelming negative force that causes people to think that they need to get rid of it immediately. Because of this fear of debt, people end up putting aside the most important aspects of their life, including their relationship, their emotional health, and all the way to protecting themselves and their family. Your savings account suffers, and this can lead you down the path to even more debt if you don't have accessible money in case of a life event. So now here's something to consider as we look at what makes our Wealth Steps philosophy so unique. So step 4 is not step 1. It's not the first thing to do, right? You shouldn't be racing to pay off debt, even if it is a high cost interest form of debt, and leave yourself exposed to what can happen today from a protection standpoint, right? So you should be saving today instead of years from now, and you shouldn't be paying off credit cards. What you should be doing is putting your family first and your balance sheet first. However, by comparison to other financial authorities, we wouldn't tell you to pay off your debt today at the expense of implementing the first 3 steps and making sure that they're there as they should be. So there's a correct order to get dressed every morning, right? And there's a correct order in which to get dressed financially. No one puts their shoes on before the socks. Just look down and see if that's true today. You put your socks on and then your shoes. So we see people directing their attention to events 20, 30, 40 years from now. And at the same time, they're terribly exposed to what can happen today. We think that is incorrect, and we believe it is in everyone's best interest to consider your todays before you start thinking about your tomorrows. So living a life debt-free where you have no credit card balance past the end of each month, no car or student loan payments, and you live in a house that is the right size based on your overall economic situation, so that you can move forward and build your balance sheet without the drag of debt.
And this brings us to the crowding out effect versus financial balance. We spoke about it a little bit earlier, and again, back to the point Ray just mentioned, it's, you know, the first 3 steps are more about you and your family. That's an important point, we feel, as opposed to the financial institutions, which are who you're working with to clear debt or go into debt or whatever it might be. So again, it's more about you and your family first, and that's the basic overall philosophy here. And let's look at the crowding out effect and how that can get in the way of your financial balance. So you don't want all these other pieces of this pie that you see here cutting into the blue, into the blue portion of the chart that's yours. I mean, the blue portion that you see, the lifestyle savings protection, that 25%, that's your portion of the pie. So you're protecting yourself and those you care about the most. This is what Well Steps will do. It'll walk you through the steps you can take today to move your decision-making process in the right direction. It's looking at this pie chart here, minimizing that 30% chunk that is the mortgage eating up, choosing a house that is not too big and it takes up maybe 15% instead of that 30%. It's by choosing a used car, perhaps, instead of driving a brand new vehicle right off the lot, which will help with minimizing the percentage of the debt you see in front of you, that 15%. While these pieces do shrink, your blue section can now expand for you, having an improved habit around savings, becoming that world-class saver by saving 15 to 20% of what you make. And keep in mind that the amount that you save is much more important than the rate of return you're seeking to obtain, which we talked about earlier as well. Having this area in the blue pie chart here that's for you and for those you love. Again, it's more about you at that point. Steps that make up this amazing program you've been exposed to all these 4 weeks will move your chart like this, in this direction. So think about how that will feel, how the effects on that will be on your life, your outlook on life today and tomorrow. So make sure your spending habits are appropriate. Establish a budget that makes sure that your approach to debt management is consistent with your overall approach to financial balance, and that'll get you to the screen that you see in front of you there. So we do have some specific action steps you can take to address some of these issues. And here are some of those specifics that you can follow to move in an appropriate and approved financial direction that we have as part of our philosophy. If you follow the hierarchy you've learned today, do things in the proper order, slow down, and the things will move in an improved direction. Improve your balance sheet before focusing on the credit card company. Make sure your mortgage decisions are moderate, 15% into a payment versus 35% into a payment. Strive to pay off the credit card balances at the end of each month. And if you can't do it today, make it a goal for tomorrow. Nothing is wrong with used cars. You'll have the quiet confidence that your financial future is more secure. Try paying cash and see if that affects decisions on what you buy. Stay alert, take these cash flow opportunities and pour them onto your balance sheet and see how your financial future will appear moving forward. And it's important for your children to be well provided, but don't throw out your own future for them by keeping up with the Joneses. Be aware of the advertising pressure that comes at you at all angles. There won't be a rate of return that will work against the drag of debt, which we spoke about. We all work hard. You preserve a good life. It's not by overspending. You do the hard things today so the life tomorrow will be easier. Don't wait. Take control. According to the time value of money, you should always be in control, and the money should always be going on your balance sheet and not moving away from your balance sheet. And step 3, which we talked about last week, can help with getting you the right liquidity, the right balance. And it can be an overwhelming chore. And again, not all this is something you're going to perhaps approach and get to today. And it can be overwhelming to dive into step 4, but there a lot of big gains if it's done properly. And there's nothing we've shown you today that should be out of your reach, is how we look at it.
So we're going to talk, that was pretty much that portion of it. We're going to go over the value again and the summary. Step 4 talks about debt, kind of that hierarchy of what Well Steps can do. And through a process of Well Steps, if you want to go through that Well Steps process, start with a summary, get your Well Steps registration after today's presentation in the follow-up email. You'll log in, register. It's private to you. We can't see anything. If you would like to share with us and get meet with us via web meeting, we can go over it with any questions you have through these steps. And if you need someone to work through those 4 steps with you, some people have worked with us to go through that and get them to all green. That's the goal here. It makes it simple. There's guidelines in there that we follow, that we have our expertise over the last 10 years or so. And the life insurance starts with that. Everybody has a human economic worth, human life value it's called. Whether you own a business or your family's balance sheet, there is a certain amount that you can get, and there's limits to how much you can get. So that's always something that's not shared with consumers, is how much actually can I get? And there is a limit. Then you go to disability insurance. We look at what you have at work. If you have anything at work, review that. Make sure you know if and when that would pay out, how many months you'd have to wait until a long-term disability policy would pay you a monthly benefit. Because disability insurance is huge for making sure cash flow is coming into your house. Actually, the majority of foreclosures are due to long-term disabilities. And many people don't understand that that's one of the most important insurances financially for themselves and their family, and if they own a business, for their business. Next is liability insurance, making sure they have overall protection or umbrella policies with their car and home policies. Make sure you could ask about umbrella coverage for very limited amounts, $200-300 a month or something around there for $1 million additional. It just kind of protects you on a higher scale. Wills and trusts, many people get burned. Those are some things that you should be getting done or reviewed every couple of years. And we see a lot of people that don't have anything done, or they may have had it done 5, 10, 15 years ago, and things have changed dramatically in their family situation, and that should be reviewed as well. So that was step 1. Step 2, world-class savings. How do you get from the average 5% savings in America to the 15 to 20% that we just talked about and the following weeks? That's how we coach clients to get to, because that's really what's going to get people to get down the road to retiring. Life event funds was last week. Very important, making sure you can actually get access to your money as fast as possible. You want to make sure you have a year's worth of liquidity, or if that's too much to think about, maybe you try to get to 6 months first and have that. But very few people have access to funds for emergencies.
And this is one of the most common areas that Ray and I see when we deal with clients, because life events, it's a very broad terminology there, but it could be anything from loss of a job, having an elderly parent have to come live with you, and this is a litany of different issues and events that can come up. And without having that life events fund available to you, and we generally don't see, we almost always see that, and again, this is an example you see in front of you, we almost always see that in the red. And that's just, it's again, from our experience, again, what you're looking at in front of you is just a general template of a fictitious client, obviously, but we generally see that in the red. This is kind of the picture we normally see when we meet with the client.
Exactly. And then, like today, going over mortgage, or if you're going to buy a house or other properties, keeping it as close as possible to 15% of your gross earnings, not buying too much house so that nothing else can get done on your balance sheet, really also holds people back. So that's something huge. And then short-term debt, making sure you pay that down and keep it off your balance sheet. So that's the kind of summary. You can review that and make sure you take part in that, whether it's today or if those, again, that are listening on recording, you have access to this at any time you want, whether it's next week or a year from now. make sure you log on to get that for yourself and use it with your own advisor, or give us a call to discuss with any questions.
Yeah, and that's just a value add we add to all, it's for everybody out there, and as Ray mentioned, at any point. In addition to that, what you'll see is on the you'll see on the right side of your screen, or you have access to at least, and you'll get them in a follow-up email from Aubrey, PDFs. And there's 5 different PDFs for this week that you have access to, and you'll be receiving an email, and you should have received another emails, different PDFs that are a little more one-sheeters, a little more detailed on some of the stuff we talked about and each case scenario and such, and Ray will talk about what they are a little bit in more detail.
So every week has PDFs based on the topic we talked about. Here we have 15 versus 30-year mortgage, what we discussed, a PDF on lost opportunity cost, real cost of losing money is another one, and then debt versus savings, which comes first? That's a great piece as well. Many people kind of have that question, do I spend down debt first or do I save? What we talked about today is having a mix of both, and that goes over that.
What I like to, with regards to the well steps, obviously we're presenting this to you in this 4-part series as part of the Maryland Alumni Association. We do appreciate you being on for that. We would like to also just remind you that well steps is part of a program we run with our regular practice all around nationwide, and it's generally done through both employers and employees. If you happen to own a business, there's also we have a PDF about buy-sell checklist and that type of thing. But again, feel free to pass this information on to any employer. You may own a business, you may work for someone who'd be interested, and we do workshops just like this, where we actually review it with an employer first. The employer can offer this to all employees. So if you found some value in this over the course of the last 4 weeks, or even just this week, if this is your first week tuning in, feel free to pass that along, or reach out to us. I have our information right there. Ask us any questions, or let us know, hey, what can I do to get this into my place of employment? It could be value. If you found some value in it, obviously it's not just limited to the University of Maryland. We're doing that for this, for the value add for the Alumni Association, but we can certainly bring this into your place of employment and do a similar workshop if you found some value here as well.
So after that, now it's time for questions. Hopefully you found this past presentation worthwhile, and we'll take any questions now through Aubrey.
Great. Thank you so much, Ray and Tim. Like they mentioned, we'll go ahead and take some time for questions. If you do have a question, there is a question box that is located in the GoToWebinar control panel that is on your right-hand side of your screen. That is how you can communicate with us. So we'll give just a couple minutes here for any questions. This can be regarding this particular session, or if you've had questions from prior sessions, we'll take those as well. So we do have one question that has just come in. How do you factor in the interest saved on a 15-year versus a 30-year mortgage?
Well, it's again, the example we used is I don't think, I'm trying to recall what we had specifically in there as far as the 15 versus the 30. Remember the example we had in there specifically. Obviously, it's not so much the interest rate, and it is the interest rate, we get that, but it's more involved with the consolidation and condensing the payments that you're making is really more of the factor we're using into it. So that's really where that's coming from. I mean, we can talk specifically about what we had on that slide in this example, but the idea here is it's more along the lines of just kind of a generic comparison in this case to show you just general what it means, what the difference is. And we're using the savings rate and the difference off of that.
And typically what we're trying to speak there is not just the interest overall that you're going to pay for a mortgage, it's having the liquidity aside paying your mortgage for life events to make sure that you're balanced in certain scenarios. So in a linear thought process, yes, 15 years, you're going to pay less interest over time for that property. What we're saying is you can still pay a 30-year mortgage in 15 years, but it allows you to have a lower cost, lower cash flow payment, and with the difference, putting it into a side account, making sure that you have some kind of savings for life events. Many people might go into foreclosure if they have no life events, large emergencies occur. But that example there was just kind of showing you that you should have some kind of savings plan on the side and taking the longer mortgage.
Yeah, this is more of a conceptual example here. What I will tell you is when we sit with a client, we generally run both. I mean, we have mortgage professionals we work with as well, and we will specifically run, a comparison of 15 versus 30, and it's a case-by-case situation. So it does vary. It depends on what interest rates are at that time, and it's not. And we certainly understand them. They will vary, but as Ray mentioned, it's more of a cash flow and just a different way of looking at what it can do for you over the long haul, and kind of getting you just a different way of looking at it as opposed to just focusing in on the interest rate.
Is there a follow-up to that, or did that answer the person's question?
To my knowledge, believe it answered, but I will let you know if in the next couple of minutes there's a follow-up to that. We do have another question that came in. This person is a retiree, and they have a federal government pension. Wanted to know if they should be saving on top of that, and at what rate would you recommend that saving to be?
Well, it depends on the pension, what they're taking out of his paycheck. Sometimes you see 7.5%. Sometimes you see 10% being taken out of the paycheck. So already, you're already seeing high savings kind of being pulled out of your paycheck. So I don't know that specific scenario, what they're taking out already. But I would say that for liquidity purposes, you would have to have some kind of other savings to make sure for those life events like we spoke about, because your pension's really for your retirement down the road, which I think you said he's a retiree.
Yeah, he's already retired. He's
Correct.
got the income coming in, so it's just a matter of now putting money aside. And to be honest, it largely will depend, to be honest, on some of the other pieces of what he has in place already. For instance, are there other protection elements in place, to cover him if there's a health issue, long-term care coverage, that type of thing, depending on the situation. So again, a lot of it's a case by case. We always try to target the 15 to 20%, but again, if you're in a retiree mode, that may be different, and it may depend on what you have to cover you should something go bad during retirement.
In retirement, though, it's more about income, how much you're pulling income
Right.
off. It's a different type of kind of financial planning, really based on how much income should I be getting a month rather than accumulation, which so in that scenario, that would be it. We've worked with people that are retirees, and their focus is, I'd like to pull in more income. How do I do that?
Without running out of money.
Right.
Right.
It's always the other part of that.
I will say if there are questions regarding specific situations or your personal situation, Ray and Tim are available to connect with. It is a benefit to you as partaking in this webinar to connect with them one-on-one to talk through your situation, and hopefully they'll be able to give you a better direction based on your need and your particular situation that's happening.
And we've already done that too with a couple of folks in the previous weeks, so we'll tell you that we've already done that. So, and there's no cost to do that. It's a value add that we have as part of this whole program.
Perfect. We do have a question regarding life insurance. So this alum is starting to reach the age where term life insurance is going to start increasing. Should they be looking to convert to different insurance products, and is there any recommendation as to what?
Well, the answer to that is likely yes. As far as conversion, it would largely depend on what options might be available to that person, depending on where they, what kind of product they have at this point.
And also, to go through week one, if you go back to the first week's presentation, that will give you some good background as well. Depends on how many years you have left over. Some term policies actually allow you to convert to a permanent position. So it depends on what your policy looks like. And if you've reviewed it, we can obviously review that for you. And then seeing what kind of dependents you have and what your goals are really for your future.
What I will tell you, though, more times than not, and again, it gets into specifics. We're not knowing more specifics about your situation. We can certainly get into that offline, but typically what we find is if you have a term policy that's either about to expire or has a conversion option, that's typically the better way to go. The question then will become, okay, well, how much do I convert? What do I convert it to? What's the premium going to be? All those other questions are really the specifics that we can assist with. And again, it's assuming you have that conversion privilege. That would be the first and foremost. If you don't, then you're probably looking at a whole nother policy or another situation.
Which we can also help with.
Okay, and a couple more questions. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying thank you for the question.
Oh, perfect. A couple more questions here. Is the 401k contribution, should that be considered part of your savings?
Well, that's a good one, and that's one of the common things we always see. Should it be part of your savings? Yes. Should it be all of your savings? I would say no. And that's kind of where the balance has to come in, because the 401k, and that's a common thing we see. And there's a couple clients I'm working with this week are in this specific situation. Without getting into too much detail, they are high level executives in pharmaceutical businesses, and they've been forced to kind of move on, and they've locked up a good portion of their savings, almost all of it, as a matter of fact, in their 401k. They have a very large 401k account. However, it's not necessarily liquid, and now the question is going to be, how long am I out of work, and what am I going to do if it's a lengthy time where I'm between jobs? This person's still in their 40s, the one I'm talking to. So it largely depends. It should be it's like a forced savings strategy. I certainly get that. It's just the liquidity, which we spoke about in week 3, the life events fund, it really doesn't satisfy that, and it's not liquid savings. So,
and to jump on additional info, there is a lot of people think, well, the 401k is a forced savings, but you're not going to touch that money for 20, 30, 40 years from now. And so that's where the liquid account or accounts really that's where we showed you the summary, where most people have not done that, or it's in the red. I'll go back to it. Life event fund, step 3, and go back to that recording and see. So if someone has not had 3, 6 months or a full year of liquid funds, maybe it makes sense to focus on that first and then come back to it. So there's different ways, and that's what the Well Steps process kind of puts you into.
And just as a reminder in detail, when you do take money out of a 401k, it is taxable, and if you're not 59 and a half, you're also going to pay a 10% penalty on that, which could in fact go counteract whatever gain you've had on that portfolio, that 401k plan that you had, just as a reminder.
And that was, I think it was last week we spoke. So if you go back to last week's recording, it will go through, there's a loan payback, different companies have different stipulations. Mm-hmm. But then as you pay that loan back, you're gonna have to pay that back, and then down the road, when you pull that same money out for retirement, you'll be taxed again. So it's almost like a double taxation in that. So 401k is a tool in a toolbox, and too few people understand what other items go with it to make it more efficient. So I would say not everything goes into a 401k.
All right.
Long-winded question, but we hope we answered it. You had any question?
Yes. If you're trying to save and pay off debt and have not been following this plan, how do you start the process of correcting your balance sheet?
Well, I think you got to just kind of step back, and then you kind of step back and just talk to someone like us and just kind of come up with a plan. You lay everything out. In many cases, and what we find, there's a lot of lost dollars or unknown dollars that are on a balance sheet, and that's why we go through the balance sheet in the Well Steps process. We do it in the right order. And many times, and this is again just using one example, we find this many times. Sometimes there's money there that you may not realize. We uncover some dollars that are available. As an example, we talked about it in one of our first weeks as far as auto insurance and homeowners insurance. If you can play with your deductibles and raise them and adjust and make sure you have the proper amount of coverages, sometimes you can find a few extra dollars there that you weren't aware was available. You may be able to save $100 a month or a couple $100 a month. It really depends, but sometimes just by moving some things around, it won't necessarily negatively impact your lifestyle, but we found a couple dollars that can now go into savings or protection and all that. Sometimes it's that simple. And it doesn't always work that way, but it's really just a matter of, and that's where when you go through Well Steps, you'll see a link to a thing called the living balance sheet, and we use that as a tool that we use with our clients to get them organized, much like Well Steps here, and it gets everything laid out in front of you. And until you have everything in front of you and you get organized, that's usually the best place to start.
Well, it's a web-based tool. That's how we have clients all over the country. It's a balance sheet. Client can see it. If they become clients, then they get their own balance sheet. And so the Well Steps is an offshoot of that. And so this gives you the simple kind of look with colors, but the short answer is really working with someone that can help you and guide you through these 4 steps would get you ultimately to where you want to be.
Okay, and then in a previous webinar, you mentioned permanent life insurance. Can you briefly explain what that is again?
Well, permanent life insurance is kind of, as you might imagine, it's basically life insurance that could be there your entire life. It's permanent. It'll be there until that one day comes and you will, face the inevitable, which we all face. So it will be there, as opposed to a term policy. And the difference really becomes term is the analogy I use a lot with a lot of clients is term is like renting the insurance. You buy a term life insurance policy for a certain period of time, whether it's 20 years or 30 years or 15 years, whatever that might be. But you're renting that insurance in the event that you pass away within that timeline, that time frame, whether it's 15, 20, or 30 years, as an example. Whereas permanent insurance is insurance where you put more, you pay a little more. It's like you're buying equity in the life insurance policy. The insurance will last until you pass away, and along the way, it's building equity. So you're putting cash value into that policy, and you're building equity, so you know it's going to be there beyond the 15, 20, or 30-year period when you eventually do pass away, which we all will face.
And also, I want to jump on that is if you go back to week 1 recording, it talks about permanent life insurance being a vehicle that allows you to spend more of your other assets. So that's the permanent death benefit allows you to have more options in retirement when you're spending down your assets that you've saved. Many people kind of lock themselves into it, into their spending ability of all the nest egg they've saved. So permanent life insurance stays on the books forever. It's the only insurance that is going to pay out on a known thing. We're all going to pass away. But it's really, in the planning world, it's the permanent death benefit that allows you to do way more and gives you way more options in retirement distribution scenarios. So I would recommend going back and listening to the week 1 recording. But that's a good question, though.
All right, perfect. It looks like we've covered all of our questions. Ray and Tim,
Excellent.
Is there anything else you want to cover before we wrap up today?
I just want to say thank you, Aubrey. Thank you, everybody. Thanks to University of Maryland for allowing us to share. And again, this
There's our contact information. Feel free to reach out to us at any point. On any question you might have.
Great, thank you so much. And just as a reminder, this webinar is recorded. It will be sent out later today. All of the recordings, if you missed one and were signed up, were sent out the weeks that they aired, and then they're also on our YouTube channel, which I will include in the follow-up email as well to refer back to. So feel free to contact either Ray or Tim directly if you'd like more information or wish to discuss your own personal situation. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you so much, Ray and Tim, for hosting this series throughout this entire month. It's been great to catch up with you week after week. And have a wonderful day to everybody, and go Terps.